The question that everyone needs to be asking right now that's investing in Bitcoin is what we saw in March during the crisis. Is that going to happen again? People need to be asking whether or not Bitcoin is correlated to the equity markets or Bitcoin is an uncorrelated asset. I'm going to look at this more closely with you right now. Could Bitcoin go to zero? Could the software fail? Is it possible that Bitcoin goes to zero? Or does every day and every 10-minute block that goes by on the Bitcoin network prove that it has sustainability? And is it more certain that Bitcoin will be here tomorrow? Is there less risk investing in Bitcoin now than there was 5 or 7 years ago? Of course, there is much less risk, much further adoption, which is continuing, but you do have downside risk and you got to weigh that. I thought Bitcoin was an uncorrelated asset. I really thought Bitcoin was an uncorrelated asset that only followed its 4-year halving cycle and had a bull market and a bear market within those phases. It turns out that the crisis proved that there's a correlation between Bitcoin and equity markets, at least during some type of liquidity crisis. Now, interestingly enough, Plan B, who's famous for the stock to flow model on Bitcoin, he did say that it does imply that Bitcoin is not an uncorrelated asset. As he had said in a September 2019 tweet, the real test is a stress situation. We saw that stress situation all through February and March when the markets sold off. And we saw Bitcoin also during that time, also following, with almost every asset directly correlated to one at that point. But that proves, and I guess the corona was the one, we had such a test, and Bitcoin, BTC, seems that it's not uncorrelated. In fact, what Bitcoin actually looks like is a 400 to 16 times leveraged S&P position with a 99% stop loss. If you look at the correlation over here between Bitcoin and the S&P 500, you could see that at times it definitely varied. I actually thought that Bitcoin was an uncorrelated asset. If you look at if you go back to May of 2017, when you had Bitcoin trading at $2,000 and the S&P trading at $24.39, right? Fast forward, S&P is up just 200 points, 230 points, and you could see that Bitcoin is up 20x, or from that point 10x. So I didn't really think that there was a tight correlation between Bitcoin, and then in the same breath, you see over here that the S&P is trading at 2675, Bitcoin at a high of $19,000, right? Come back just a little bit, S&P is trading at the exact same level, and Bitcoin is off down to $8,000. Go even further, again, the S&P is still unchanged. It's still unchanged, and you're seeing Bitcoin putting in up. Actually, the S&P is trading up now. S&P is trading up 300 points, and Bitcoin is trading down to $6,000 from $19,000. They just don't seem correlated to me. It seems as if Bitcoin is doing its own thing on this leg, its bear market phase, right? And I see the S&P was up, and over in this portion over here, why the S&P was up a little bit, Bitcoin went bananas, right? But looking at what happened during the crisis, you could see in any type of liquidity crunch, any type of crisis, you're going to see that tight correlation between Bitcoin and the S&P. Any Bitcoin investor right now needs to ask themselves, what do they feel are the odds of another liquidity crisis happening? Right now, it seems to me, if you look at the dollar, it looks to me that the dollar, which has weakened considerably since the crisis, right? It has weakened considerably ever since the swap lines were opened up right over here in March, right? Right over here, March 17th, swap lines opened up to Australia's central bank direct and other central banks around the world. That has seemed to alleviate the pressure on the US dollar, which is now trading lower and seems to be in a comfortable range over here. Sure, the dollar could firm up. It could even firm up possibly into 1930, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be trading above that. And actually, it looks like it could be going down and testing the lower portion of the range around 95.20. So right now, it doesn't seem to me that the dollar is a force that could, or there's any problems in the system. If you remember going back right here to the crisis, it was all the way back in September of 2019 that we started having the repo market crisis, and that's when things were not okay. That continued through December, and in December, at the end of the year, it was supposed to be when that actually stopped. That's not what happened. It increased all through January and February until in March, QE has started again. QE does tend to be deflationary over time. The last time running up to the dollar crisis, if you remember, you were seeing the equity markets strong. You were seeing at that same time, you were seeing Bitcoin strong. Bitcoin ran up from $7,000 to $10,400 during that period. You were also seeing at that point, gold was also strong. Here's gold from the same period, right? January up through February, gold was on a tear. The thing was, the dollar was also during that period. The dollar was also rising. In this current situation, I think that we are going to see the dollar perhaps come off even a little bit as long as it stays below 98.30. I'm expecting the dollar weakness or the little bit of a tone of dollar weakness to continue, but I am expecting the dollar to stay within its range, and I'm expecting at one point in the future it does rear its head again. It does come up past 100, possibly even breaking 103, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. In that environment, I do see Bitcoin thriving as it did in the past. As when you had that strong dollar, up equity markets, up gold, also up Bitcoin, right? It's only if something breaks that you have a concern, a legitimate concern on Bitcoin, more so than any government making Bitcoin illegal, more so than the internet going out. I think the greatest risk that you're looking at near term at any point is any type of liquidity crisis. But just like in 2008, if you go back to 2008, and I bring up 2008 because this was a liquidity crisis for gold over here. Let me pull up the weekly time frame for you. You could see it a little bit better. Here is, by the way, it is in December of 2008, right over here when the Fed started QE. Here was the liquidity crisis. Before that, this was when Lehman went under in October. You see gold went off 30% over here. Gold went off 30% over here. During this crisis over here, gold went off 15%, right? So next time there is a liquidity crisis, do you think gold goes off 30% again? 15% again? Or maybe does it only go off 7%? Or maybe does it only go off 7% at that point? Same thing with Bitcoin. This was its 2008 liquidity crisis that we saw on gold, right? And Bitcoin had a steep pullback, no question about it. Bitcoin pulled back all the way from the highs. It did pull back a total of 63%. Now, what happens the next time? Maybe there's a 30% pullback. Maybe if 3, 4, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, there's another dollar liquidity crisis. The last time there was one in 2008, the Fed's action was able to really, really hold things together for 10 years or call it 12 years until things really broke, right? So is it 6 years this time? Maybe. It's going to happen again. But it's not happening right now. And this is the trade to focus in on right now. It's Bitcoin. This is looking at the weekly chart. You could be waiting for Bitcoin to break the trend line over here. You could be waiting for that break, for the bull market to begin, for a clearance of 10,400. Once you do, it's official on this channel that the bull market has begun. No question about that, right? So what about entering now? Listen, I don't know that we see 8,500. I don't know that we see 8,200. I do think that if we see below that trend line over here, something's going on that's not normal. Something would be going on that's not normal for us to break this trend line at this point, and also that support. If that did happen, I would be very cautious on Bitcoin, as it's possible we could see a pullback all the way towards 72. You can see over here, you could see this area of support in that area, right? It's possible we pull all the way back to, that would be a 30%, that would be over 30% drawdown from the 10,400 high. I don't think that happens. That is possible. I don't think that happens, right? What I do think happens is that from here, we go on, first take over this trend line over here, and then quickly burst through 10,400. That's what I think the next move on Bitcoin is. All right, we're gonna take a look at this chart of Bitcoin and the average person who's been holding Bitcoin for a year or over. Right over here, you can see right now it's trading at all-time highs of 62%. 62% of people have been holding Bitcoin for at least a year. If you look back to the last part in the cycle, Bitcoin did something like that. That was back over here in this area where Bitcoin continued to peak out for quite a time before it had its first pullback. That's when the bull market really got going, when it had the first pullback, you could see. And the entire bull market, you're seeing the percentage of people owning Bitcoin going from a high number, as it is now, 62%, going down, dropping all the way down towards, this looks to me somewhere around the 45% level. When it gets to around 45%, that's when Bitcoin in the past has peaked out. That's the top of the halving cycle. Look, you can see it again over here. So this is just some further data which goes ahead and actually affirms the thesis that I hold about Bitcoin, showing what's happening on chain also has direct correlation to what's happening price during those 4-year cycles. You could see over here was the top of the first halving cycle, and you could see down there the amount of people owning Bitcoin for over a year was around 40%, sometimes even a little bit lower, down to 35%. Now, when Bitcoin peaked out, right, when Bitcoin found its low and then started its bull run, that's when price was held against, we were up around 60%. We're right here around 59, 58%, and we're just holding out there until it comes off. That's when the Bitcoin price really gets going. That's where we are right here in the cycle right now, as price remains on these over all-time high rates of 60% of people owning Bitcoin for over a year or longer. That's when you're going to see right now, the price start shooting up, and you're going to see that changing as there's going to be a lot of adoption of Bitcoin. You're going to see a lot of new buyers coming in at much higher prices until we get back down towards, or at least below the 50% level. Below 50%, that's when you want to be mindful of taking profits out of this next cycle, which brings up the question that even if we fall down to 4,000 right now, even if Bitcoin goes ahead and tests near the low from the March crisis, is it going to trigger anyone who's holding Bitcoin for a year longer to sell? No, that didn't. That already happened back in March, and the holders didn't sell. So what would happen that would make them, instead they would actually step in and buy. Adam Back replying that if it did happen, if we saw 4,000, he knows that he would be buying more. He said it would probably resemble something that happened back in May of 2015, where there was an inverted Bird Khalifa price formation, barely held under $200 for a few hours and took off like a rocket, still holding on to that buy to this day. What he's saying, if we were to see some type of pullback that challenged the March lows over here when we traded around 4,000, obviously you have to believe that could happen again if we had a liquidity crisis again. It doesn't look like we're having any type of dollar issues right now. There's no shortage of dollars. So there's nothing that would trigger. Remember back in September, October, November, December, we were seeing the repo market and it kept getting out of control. We were having issues with the dollar and the piping of the system, of the dollar-based system. That's not happening right now. So nothing should really shock us to the downside. If we went back down to 4,000, it would probably only last momentarily. That would be definitely a place that I would also be buying. But right now, I have orders in at 8,500. I have orders in at 8,500 and 882, and I don't know that they will get filled. But if they do, I'll be happy to pick up Bitcoin right now, buying off of support. Again, if we broke this level over here, if we broke the 8,100 level, if we broke under this trend line over here, which should now be support, breaking below that trend line over there, and then this horizontal this horizontal support at 8,100, call it, that would open up further downside on Bitcoin. That could open up 6,500. Again, that would be a place I'd be looking to buy, but that all could happen. And if you think about it, if you just pause for a second, a 30% pullback from where we are right now, right? 30% pullback from the high we just put in, that would just bring us back down towards 7,200. I do not think we go lower than 7,200 at any time over here. Again, I don't know if my orders get filled at 8,500 and 8,200, right? If they break 8,100, we're going down further, even as far as 6,500. But I don't think that we're taking out 7,200 before making new highs over here at 10,400 and the bull market begins. Even then, even when the bull market begins, even when we take out that strong, that resistance here at 10,400, right? And the bull market might begin sooner. The bull market might begin sooner. The more we consolidate in this area, if we're breaking it out over here, right, and prices around 90, 93, 9,400, 9,400, that might be the start of the bull market. It depends when we get the breakout. It depends when we get the breakout and how far away. But right now, the safe line is 10,400. Once we get above there, I think we see a pretty swift move to 12,000. We'll see. I think it's coming soon. That's an update on Bitcoin, though. I wanted to really, really give everyone a good look at what's going on with Bitcoin. I know that everyone knows my position and firm belief on Bitcoin. This is the instrument to be focused in on right now. It's getting ready to break out over here. Everything is going well for Bitcoin fundamentally, technically. This is when big moves happen. We're looking at a 10 to 35x, depending on the euphoria in Bitcoin coming, and we're about to break out here.